Hello, and welcome to the Field Guides. Bill Michaelek here, and you're listening to part 2 of our Insectapalooza episode. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, we recommend doing so. That's where we met this episode's guest, Jason Dombroskie, the collection manager and director of the Insect Diagnostic Lab at Cornell University. We took a walk on his property in central New York State, and then he gave us a behind-the-scenes tour of Cornell's Insect Collection. In this part, we're going to finish up our tour and then jump ahead to that same evening, when we met Jason for the main event, an evening of mothing. Jason set up sheets and special lights to attract myriad night-flying insects, and then he proceeded to blow our minds with his encyclopedic knowledge of the critters who flew in, as well as the stories he shared about each of them. As in part 1, you're going to hear the sound of a camera shutter at different points during the episode. When you do, it's our way of letting you know that you can visit the notes page of this episode to see pictures and videos of what we're describing at that point in the show. And don't forget that my wife and daughter joined us on this adventure, so you're going to hear their voices during the episode as well. So now let's head back to the Insect Collection at Cornell University and listen in as Jason takes us through the second half of our tour. Enjoy.
So in here we've got a variety of our Tedogoniids, which are katydids. And so this is a variety of species from North and Central and South America right here. Some of them are really striking though. So these are obviously well camouflaged as a leaf.
Do you know if some of the color there, is that how they were at moment of capture, or is this their color being lost in some way?
Yeah, so green is a really hard pigment to keep. So for a lot of, especially the fatty insects, that green fades to yellow. So these would have been brilliant green when they were fresh.
Got it.
Okay, and let's go, well, actually I'll show you another part of the collection that's not so showy but really important. So we talked about how we preserve insects on slides if they're really small, or insect parts on slides. Most insects are pinned as adults, but for larval insects, so insect immatures, if you put a pin through them, they're just going to shrivel to nastiness. So for things like caterpillars, they are stored in ethanol. And so we've got here is a whole bunch of different vials with caterpillars inside them. Each of those vials has a label in it telling you where it is and what it is. And these are really useful for identification because caterpillars are often really difficult to identify. There's a lot of different species. They're much more poorly known than the adults. And the characters you're looking at for these caterpillars are actually just fine hairs or hooks on the feet called crochets. So it's really fine characters. So when someone sends me a photo of a little green caterpillar on a leaf that's zoomed out, so it's about, just a speck, I say, that's nice. That is a caterpillar. Wow. And you could be right on your ID, but I can't tell you.
Mm-hmm. So are they immediately put into ethanol? Because I remember when we did some fish preservation, we would do a mixture of formaldehyde, and then we'd eventually swap them into ethanol.
So you can do that, but it's less than ideal because the bacteria actually stay alive in their gut for a while and then degrade them and turn them into really nasty brownish. Like some of these probably were done incorrectly. So here's some pretty big caterpillars that are kind of brownish. Mm-hmm. But what you want to do if you want ideal specimens is you get them fresh. You actually put them into boiling water for just a few seconds. And that, first of all, causes the body to distend to make it nice and straight so you can see all the characters that you need to see.
Wow.
And it also kills the bacteria in their gut. And then you put them into ethanol. For us, we use 70% ethanol because it keeps them somewhat pliable. Any higher percentage, they're much too brittle. Mm-hmm. But higher percentage is what you want for DNA work. So if you know you're going to use it for DNA work, you want to use 95 or 99%. But even better is popping in a minus 80 freezer. So yeah, not much to look at, but a very important part of the collection. Yeah. And so now we'll go to the other room. I talked about freezing stuff that comes in, so here's our minus 20 freezer. No bare hands in this room.
Oh, interesting.
There's a reason for that. So the people that installed this told us all kinds of horror stories about what can happen if you have bare hands in there. Because if you touch that back wall with a bare hand, you freeze to it instantly.
Oh, gosh.
And then what?
Right.
So we always have 2 people in here. You're always wearing gloves.
Yeah.
And so here are specimens that have been put into the freezer. We put them into wheeled carts, put them in the freezer, minus 20 for 4 days, and that should kill off all the live insects that could be in there. And it is cold. In the winter, it's not so bad because I can put my winter coat on, but in the summer in shorts, it's brisk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mentioned in this room, we have the flies, the ants, bees, and wasps. So we're primarily built as a research collection. So yes, we do have big showy butterflies. I showed you some of those. But our specialty is people's research. So one of the former curators of the collection worked on horseflies and deerflies. So we have one of the biggest collections of those in the world. We have over half the world's species. And if I just pull some out here, so you can see some with crazy long beaks. Those are probably not used for biting mammals. They're probably used for drinking nectar.
This tray we're looking at, folks, there's probably several dozen specimens in here, but I see that a lot of these are different colors. So you were saying before, like, what is red?
Red is North America, so the Nearctic
okay.
region. Yellow is neotropical, so Central and South America.
Okay.
So this one's mostly neotropical species, but some from Europe and Asia. There's one Australian species there.
Okay, so those colors are lining the boxes, like the edge of the box.
So you can quickly scan, if you got something from North America, scan the North American species to help you ID things. And then I'll show you, I'll show you this.
Oh, Hymenoptera. Getting into the wasps, bees,
So we just open a cabinet and there's a whole bunch of nests in here.
hives.
What we're looking at here is a whole bunch of different shapes and sizes of wasp nests. These were used in a study of the evolution of wasp nest architecture, and these are all made of chewed wood, paper
Wow.
basically.
I assume, I know that there's the sticks. It looks like they were cut, so you're bringing the whole wasp nest without damaging it all. But I also assume that if you're handling them, that you would probably need gloves or some...
They're really brittle, so we try not to handle
Oh,
them.
I see.
These
Okay.
are really challenging to move. Something like this especially has all these brittle parts. But what's amazing is that these are old. These were probably brought on a steamship over several months, maybe before the Panama Canal was dug. Wow.
It'll take the long way.
Yeah, and so they would have brought trunks and trunks and trunks of these. Now, it probably was their servants that were doing the hard work.
Right.
But these survived that voyage all the way back here
amazing.
before there were interstate highways, before
Wow.
there was widespread air travel.
Amazing.
And it's my job to make sure that they stay there.
That's it.
No pressure.
Myrmacina?
Yeah, so these are some of the ants. So right now I've pulled a drawer out of bullet ants, which are really big.
Aren't those the ones that bite and they hurt
So-
horribly?
They sting. It's one
Or
of the
it's a
most
sting?
painful stings known. You can actually
Got it.
physically see the stinger on them.
So it's not a bite, it's a sting.
I
see.
think they can probably do both. And so they would inject some sort of chemical. So they're called bullet ants because apparently the feeling of getting stung is like being shot. In some places they call them 3-sting ants because if you get stung 3 times, you want to die.
Oh gosh, okay.
I've never been stung by them. In fact, one of the first times I saw these, because you don't miss them, they're big ants. They're what, almost an inch in size?
Yeah.
Basically, I was sitting on a log, and this is also in French Guiana. Boy, a lot of memories from there. Sitting on a log, waiting for rain to pass to go mothing, just sitting there with headlamps off at night, and thinking, I should have looked before I sat down. And first thing I looked down, and there's a possum on my lap.
What?
And this possum, it was terrified by this headlamp suddenly in its face and just let out this shriek and then ran away. And then I also saw that I was sitting on a bullet ant line, so they were traveling over my legs, which, that's harmless. But if I accidentally swatted one, that would have been a little dangerous.
Oh god.
But yeah, always look before you leap in the tropics.
So before you put that away, though, what's over here where there's all these pins and you can't see what?
Yeah, so those are really small ants. And so for really tiny insects, we do what's called pointing. And pointing is a tiny little piece of cardboard shaped like a triangle, and then you have a little tiny dab of glue, and you stick the specimen to that.
Yeah, they're like these little white flags, and it's just on the tip of the flag, yeah. Wow.
And then if you get smaller than that, then you would typically slide mount it or preserve it in ethanol. Is there any other flies or wasps you want to see while we're here?
We wanted to see the Luna, right?
Oh, Luna. Oh, yeah, we can
yeah.
do that.
It's tough, I'm sure. It's one of those things, I'm sure on the ride home I'll be
Right,
like, why
we're
didn't
gonna
I
think
ask
of it.
about this?
All right, so for Luna moth, this is one of our big showy local moths. And here's a series of them. So if I were to describe this, the wingspan is what? That's about 4 inches, 4 to 5. They're sort of this pale, ghostly bluish green. The leading edge of the wing is sort of brownish pink. There's some eye spots on each wing, and there's long tails. And these tails have been shown in a recent study to actually deflect bat echolocation.
Wow.
And so if you clip the tails off these, they can still fly, but bats have an easier time catching them. So they do serve a purpose. And you'll see the tails do have sort of a twist in them, which is probably how that functionally works. Now, Luna moths are impressive, but we can go more impressive than that.
Sure.
So the same genus,
Wow.
here's one in Southeast Asia, where it's actually sexually dimorphic. So the males actually look completely different, and the females are quite a bit bigger, sort of that same Luna pattern. The males, though, are a complex pattern of yellows and browns. This is one called Actius minus. And then some of the other ones, here's Selene, which is one you get in Asia. So it's not sexually dimorphic.
And these numbers, this 1807, is that the year?
So what you've got there is at the header, you'll see the name of the species. So it says Actius selene. And then you'll see it says Hübner. So Jakob Hübner described this species. And he described it in a publication which he did to 1806, but didn't actually come out to 1807, which is why there's square brackets there.
Got it.
So this is a really complicated one. But yeah, that date just tells you the date of description. So let's say you come across a group that's not well known, you have a name there, an author and a year, you now know to look for a paper by Jakob Hübner in that year to find the description for that.
And the collection could have been yesterday, but the date we're seeing is the description date.
Correct.
Okay.
The actual data collection would be on the specimen. So underneath each of these is a label that tells you, date, location, collector, any other biological information that you've got. And let's see what we got. Here's some more.
Wow.
This is an African one called Argema mitrii. I think these are called the comet moth. Also long tails. These are much bigger. So this is, if I stretch my hand out, stretch my fingers and thumbs out, it's about that size. So it's a big moth. And it's got great big eye spots on each wings, long tails, which probably are also deflecting bat echolocation calls. Obviously popular with people for some reason.
Wow.
It looks like it's painted.
So the very first Luna moth my dad ever saw, he used to grab me moths from his workplace in Ontario, and some of the guys he worked with mentioned to him, "Oh, there's this moth you should give to Jason." And he saw it sitting on the wall, and he thought they'd drawn one on paper and cut it out. And so he's like, "Ah, ha, ha, that's funny." And he went to hit it, and the thing fluttered. Oh, whoa!
Wow.
How about I show you the most valuable part of the collection?
That'd be awesome.
So
Yeah.
Let's go this way.
Okay.
Only VIPs get to see this room.
And us.
So this room looks like nothing special, except this is our type room. And so when you describe a new species, you designate one specimen to be the holotype. And the holotype is irreplaceable. So if anybody ever has questions about a species I described, like, what did he mean by that? They can find the holotype of that specimen here. And so if we look at some of these holotypes, each one of these is a unique specimen and is priceless.
So in the past, when we were looking at these drawers, it was like sometimes there was multiple per box. This one, now there's only a single specimen per box, and that's because this is the type specimen that is the reference.
Yes.
Wow.
So the ones that have two, are those male and female?
So yeah, what you have there is what's called a holotype and an allotype. The allotype is basically almost as valuable as a holotype, but the opposite sex. And so if, let's say you describe a species, and it turns out you actually had two species in there and didn't realize it. We have a new technology that discovers, okay, the ones that have this marking are one species, this one has that marking is another species. Well, which name goes with which one? You have to find the holotype, and the holotype determines which name goes where, and the other one gets a new name. So yeah, these are priceless specimens. So these are sorted by author, and so we've got various beetles and moths and flies and wasps in here.
Wow.
The holotypes.
So if someone wants to reference a holotype, do they have to come here, or like how does that work?
There's several ways. So we prefer that people come here. So I do have a lot of researchers that come here to look at holotypes, but in many cases we can often photograph it. So we've got really nice photographic equipment. We can go down to 100x. They tell us what views they need to see of it, and then we'll do that.
Okay.
And in many cases, sometimes they need a genitalia dissection or whatnot. If it's something that we can't do here, like they've got some advanced technique to do that I don't know how to do, we will sometimes mail it using registered mail. I'm very reluctant to.
Say.
Usually I hand carry it when I go to a meeting and someone else will be at the meeting. So like at this last meeting I was at a few weeks ago in Estonia, I actually brought some holotypes with me to give to a colleague of mine in France who needed to do some dissections. I wanted him to do the dissections on these priceless specimens.
You probably didn't check that baggage, huh?
Nope. No, it's carry-on. No, I got really creative with carrying specimens in carry-on. I can bring a lot back in carry-on.
Do you get some funny questions at security, though?
I've been detained.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually there's the initial questions of bugs. Why? And then you show them, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, okay. And they call their buddies over to come and have a look at it. And then they're like, oh, I saw this caterpillar in my garden. And then you know you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jason, we can't thank you enough. This
Yeah.
has been, wow, a once in a lifetime, I feel like.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to what we're going to see tonight.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to see the insect collection, we do have a display that I mentioned. It's at the Museum of the Earth, where we pulled out about 1,000 of our specimens of just the ooh-ah stuff. So we've high-graded to the stuff that interests people, where the curator of the collection, Dr. Corey Moreau, and I wrote text for a lot of it, and then our technicians pulled the specimens and arranged them in really amazing ways. So if you are in the Finger Lakes region before December, do check it out. It's really quite nice.
Before December 2022.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. And we'll put links to that on our episode notes page, too.
And we do have a website for it, too, if you can't make it here.
Oh, what's the website?
So, well, we do have a Cornell University Insect Collection website. If you Google that, you'll find it.
Okay.
But the Museum of the Earth does have a website that's really quite flashy and nice for the exhibit itself.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So just look up Paleontological Research Institute, Six-Legged Science is the name of the exhibit.
Great. Thank you.
And so, with our tour complete, we spent the rest of the day exploring nearby Ithaca, New York. But as the sun started to set, we made the 45-minute drive south to a hilly, wooded road outside of Big Flats, New York, meeting up with Jason at a nature preserve I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce. Now, one thing I need to mention before we begin. As you'll hear shortly, Jason's sheets and lights brought in a large number of insects. And while we were recording, there were dozens and dozens of moths and other insects flying around us, often flying close to the mic and sometimes running directly into it. So if you hear strange sounds in the mix, thumping, buzzing, or vibrating sounds, it's likely the sound of insects coming in close for their 15 minutes of fame. And with that, let's get to the mothing. All right, folks, we are here at Steege Hill Nature Preserve.
Yes.
And we have a sheet set up behind us with a vapor light.
No, this one is an LED light called a LEPI LED.
The other one was the mercury vapor, Bill. Come on.
So we just set it up. It is about, what time do you guys think it is? 9:30 or so? Let me check. Yep, it's about 9:30. We are here on a beautiful July night. I'd say it's about, 75 degrees, something like that?
Sure.
It's warm.
It is July 3rd, so you're going to hear some fireworks in the background.
For once, it's not people shooting.
That's right.
Yeah.
You
No
may
guarantees on that.
You may also hear Linda and Violet in the background. They're off collecting blueberries right now. But Jason was telling us that things probably won't get going for a little bit, right?
Yeah, there's a few things that come out this early, but it's going to be a trickle. I can already see a few moths and flies coming in, but things won't start happening for about another half hour till it gets really dark.
All right, so we figured we'd use this time to talk a little bit about the site, about permissions that Jason has to be here, but then also Jason wanted to talk about the basics of what is a moth.
Let's start with Steege Hill. So first of all, it looks like it should be pronounced Steege Hill. It's Steege, and I found out that the proper pronunciation is Steege after calling it Steege Hill for about an hour in a presentation. So Steege Hill is not far from Big Flats, sort of the Elmira area, southern tier of New York State. And it, as the name suggests, it is a great big hill. On one side, it faces south, and we've got some more typical southern hardwood forests like oaks and hickories. And on the north side of the hill, we've got some more northern forests. So we've got things like white birch and eastern white pine and sugar maples and red maples and things like that. So a completely different forest in just a short walk. And we've got a light setup in both habitats, actually. This property is one of many owned by the Finger Lakes Land Trust. I volunteer with them doing various educational programs. So I do various moth nights or family insect walks, things like that. But if you live in the Finger Lakes area, I strongly suggest looking them up. They've got a huge number of properties with great hiking trails, and they love donations to buy up more properties. In fact, the Finger Lakes Land Trust just purchased the largest private parcel of property on Cayuga Lake. It used to be part of, I think it was a NYSEG property, and the plans were to build a nuclear power plant on it, which fell through. And then it was up for sale, and luckily the Finger Lakes Land Trust was able to purchase it with some very generous donations. And so that's protected forever now. But yeah, check it. They've got a beautiful website with lots of maps of their hiking trails and their various reserves. And I should also mention, we are here at night. You're not allowed to be on Finger Lakes Land Trust properties at night. However, I have special permission to do moth research here, so I can be here, but you can't.
So speaking of land trusts, we did cover, in our neck of the woods, we have the Western New York Land Conservancy, also a land trust, and we covered a lot of the great work that land trusts do in our episode where we visited the College Lodge. So if people want to know more about land trusts, not just here in New York, but all over the country, check out that episode.
Yeah, I guess we should talk about what a moth is.
Yes.
So actually, let me just pitch it at you, and let's see if I can put you on the spot. What is a moth?
A moth is not a butterfly, but a butterfly's a moth.
Oh, what?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, God.
You're
it's
kind of correct.
It's one of the. Well, I didn't. If he is correct, I didn't know
I
that.
did have someone tell me that once.
Oh, wow.
So explain, how is that kind of correct?
So butterflies and moths belong to the order Lepidoptera. Lepidoptera, literally translated, means scaly wing. And if you touch a moth or butterfly wing, or indeed their whole body, you'll get scales that rub off. And that's what creates the color patterns on their wings and on their bodies. Despite what you might have heard, if you rub the scales off the wings of moth, they still can fly.
I was just going to ask you to do
But they just look ugly because you've taken their pattern away. But yeah, if you take all the scales off a moth or butterfly, you get left with transparent wings, a shiny brown body, shiny brown legs. Like the whole thing is covered in scales, basically, that rub off. Now, this elusive thing of what's the difference between a butterfly and a moth, and the short answer, there's no difference. Butterflies are one subgroup of micromoth.
Oh.
In fact, locally, there's characters to identify butterflies that are pretty reliable, but once you get into the tropics, I can't identify butterflies from moths at any time. So butterflies are a nice little natural group that sit right in the middle of the moths. And it's really a quirk of the English language. Most languages use the same word for butterfly and moth, which is how it should be. Like in French, it's papillon for both. In Spanish, it's mariposa. Unless you're in Central America, then they have polillas for the really tiny ones, so they get their own separate name. But yeah, it's a quirk of the English language.
Okay.
Interesting.
So it's not true when someone says moths come out at night and butterflies come out during the day. And
Sometimes.
right. Or moths have showy antennae or butterflies have simple antennae. Sometimes. Right?
So, and locally, there are good antenna characters you can use. So for New York State, all of our butterflies have a club at the very end of the antenna.
Okay.
All of our moths have either a really long club that takes about half the antenna, or no club at all, just a straight antenna, or a feathery antenna.
Okay.
So moths are everything else. And that's partially because moths versus butterflies really outnumber them in diversity. So it's about 20 to 1.
Wow.
So
I
there's...
didn't realize it was that.
Oh yeah, it's probably actually quite a bit higher than that once you get into undescribed species.
Okay.
And butterflies, we used to think they're much more closely related to the big moths, the macromoths. Turns out they're actually most closely related, really way down on the tree, and they're actually quite an old group. Butterflies existed before most of the big moths did.
Oh, okay.
And you said butterflies are more, or they're grouped with the micro moths.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
Cool.
even the large butterflies, you'd still would consider them micro moths.
Yeah.
Right.
So micro doesn't necessarily refers to overall size.
Well, it's a good generalization. So like 95+% micromoths are tiny, and 95+% of macromoths are big.
Right.
That's so funny. So the butterflies are just weird micro moths.
Right. they're micromoths by like phylogeny and evolution, but so many of them are so big and showy. So.
Butterflies just get all the press because they're so show-offy.
Yeah, and once you get into the tropics, there are some micromoths that are fairly close related to butterflies that are big and diurnal and really gaudy.
You know what? It's funny because when you were asking Bill how to define a butterfly or moth, I would have used the term lepidopteran, but then the way my mind works is I start thinking, what's the closest relative to lepidopterans? And I don't know off the top of my head, like what insect group?
It's a group we'll probably see tonight. You'd see a lot more if we're near water. It's the caddisflies.
Oh, okay.
And so caddisflies are the order Trichoptera, and Trichoptera means hairy-winged. And so basically picture a moth and change the scales to hairs.
Whoa.
Those are some hungry barred owls.
They're
Or angry or happy.
territorial.
Who cooks for you?
What?
So I'm hoping that Mike picked that
Yeah,
up.
I think there's no way it didn't. But Bill, could you explain the who cooks for you thing as long as I just said it?
So I imagine a lot of our listeners already know, but that is the barred owl, and their call sounds similar to someone saying, who cooks for you all, kind of that two phrase. But when you get two barred owls in the vicinity of each other, they just start making very distinctive monkey calls. Some
Right.
people call.
Oh, the monkey. What Jason was saying. What?
Yeah.
That was cool to hear.
Yeah, so they like Trichoptera too, apparently. So basically, picture a moth, take the scales, replace them with hairs, and you've got Trichoptera, basically.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I mean, they definitely have a similarity to them.
And
So
forgive me if you said this, but what does Lepidoptera mean then?
Scaly-winged.
Scaly. Okay, yeah, you did say that.
And so superficially at a sheet, when you don't have them under a microscope, they do look really similar. And there's certain characters you can use. Like caddisflies always hold their wings roof-like over the body, and they have long antennae that stick straight out in front of them. Whereas most moths have some combination otherwise. So they have all kinds of different ways they hold their wings. And there's some that do hold their antennae way out straight, but usually they're much shorter than a typical caddisfly. And I should back up a bit and say, well, of course, moths and butterflies are insects. And insects have three main body parts, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And so the head has compound eyes with many tiny lenses, and we'll probably talk about those more later. And they also sometimes have additional eyes called ocelli. And they're very small, single-lensed, and all they do is detect light or dark. They probably have some other function too, I don't know what it is, but especially the diurnal moths have really distinct ocelli.
And some larvae just have ocelli, right?
Technically quite different, it's called stemma.
Oh.
And so in a caterpillar, the eyes are actually down near the mouth. And so when you picture a caterpillar's head, it looks like they've got great big eyes, but those are actually just a big bulging head that's holding massive jaw muscles. Their vision is right down near the mouth. It's just, it's like a little semicircle of little dots called stemma. So they've got terrible vision. If you picture a caterpillar, it's got essentially about 6 or 7 pixel vision on this side, 6 or 7 pixels on that side.
Oh gosh.
Now, when you're a caterpillar just crawling along, that's no big deal. You're feeling your way along. It's not that important.
You just want to eat.
But if you notice inchworms, have you ever noticed they bob their head before they land? That's because they can't see well. And so if you're on a twig, your terrible vision tells you it's light, 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 dark, 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 light, 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 light. But if you bob your head, you can see exactly where the boundary of the light and the dark is. And so any caterpillar that moves like an inchworm does that head bob thing, whereas other caterpillars do not. And actually, that's a good segue into moths and butterflies have a 4-parted life cycle. So we've been talking about the adults mostly so far. So the adults will be out flying now, and the females will lay eggs. Those eggs hatch into a caterpillar or a larva. And that caterpillar is basically the feeding stage of the insect. There's actually a lot of adult moths and butterflies that don't feed at all as adults. So it's basically eating and growing and eating huge amounts of food and defecating a lot. So caterpillar poop, if you are in an outbreak, you'll actually hear it. It sounds like rain around you.
Yeah, I've been in an outbreak in Allegheny at one point, and it sounded like it was downpouring all night, but it was just caterpillar poop raining down on our tents.
Yeah, great nutrition for plants.
Well, I mean, it also killed a number of trees that year because it was I think it was a gypsy moth year. It was a huge one, maybe like 2012 or 2013, something like that.
Yeah, and to be totally PC, what was formerly called the gypsy moth is now called spongy moth.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't even, I've made a point in the past not to say the old name, and I can't even remember what we've heard people call it before, but spongy moth is new to me. I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, and it comes from, the French common name for it is la spongieuse, and it refers to the egg masses, which kind of look like cotton candy, kind of spongy looking. In fact, I saw a bunch while we were hiking up here when it was still light out.
It's kind of like a yellowy, like a lightish, or like a dull yellowy, or tan. Yeah, tan would be the better word for it.
And we're probably going to see some of those tonight, you think?
It's hard to say. So I saw some males flying earlier, and I find that when they first come out, they often don't come to lights right away. And it can be completely unpredictable. So last year there was a big outbreak near Plattsburgh. And when I was there, I ran a light, and while I had maybe, a dozen at the light, during the day, I saw thousands. I could swat them out of the air, and they just were not coming to light. And I've had the other extreme at my place last year where I'd see very few around, but there was one night where I think I counted over 300 at my light.
Wow.
So they were just there and just came out at night, apparently. So you really can't predict when something's going to come to a light and when it's not going to.
And you said the way you recognize it is because they fly a very particular way?
They have a very spastic flight. And there are a few other things that fly like that, but I happen to know that they're going to be common here. And I've caught them before, and that's what they're going to be. And as usual, I got distracted and off on a tangent. I didn't finish talking about moth life cycles.
Oh, yeah.
So egg, larva, then we got distracted. So larva eats and grows and eats and grows. And then eventually it turns into, there's a green lacewing right on your wrist.
Oh, nice.
Whoa.
Do you want to describe that guy?
So we have about 3/4 of an inch long, slender green body with these transparent wings that extend past the end of the abdomen.
Like a third of the wing extends past the end of the abdomen. That's really, really narrow, almost pencil-like. And it also kind of keeps the wings over its body like a tent almost, like a triangular shape.
What did you say
and
that
it's
was?
feeding on my sweatshirt. No.
And if you got a really close look, you'd see the eyes are often beautiful and golden.
Oh, I'm almost seeing a little bit of a reflection of them. But.
And what did you call this one again?
It's a green lacewing, and there's several species here that look like that. By the way, the common types of lacewings you get here are two different families, green lacewings and brown lacewings. Brown lacewings are always brownish. Green lacewings can be green, brown, yellow, pretty much any color, but are usually green. And so they belong to a different insect order called Neuroptera, which means net-winged. And so you can see that fine net-like pattern in the venation on it. And of course, again, I got sidetracked.
Right.
So insect life cycles. So moth life cycles, egg, larva, pupa is that intermediate stage between the larva and the adult. And that's where old body parts are broken down, new body parts are developing, and eventually from that, the adult emerges.
All right. When I was teaching second grade, we did a butterfly unit where we would raise painted lady butterflies. And kids would always call the pupa stage, they would interchangeably use the terms cocoon and chrysalis. So this is how I explained it. Tell me how wrong it is, okay?
Okay.
So I would say they all make chrysalises, but some of them will make a cocoon around their chrysalis.
So I can kind of actually you.
Push up your glasses.
So basically, chrysalis is a term that's just for butterflies.
Okay.
And most of our butterflies do not create any kind of cocoon. So like the painted lady chrysalis is naked. It's sitting there.
Right.
It doesn't have any silk around it. So if you want to be technical, you'd call the inner structure a pupa, which is accurate for both moths and butterflies.
Okay.
And then if it's got a silken covering over it, that's a cocoon.
Would you consider when they build like a protective structure out of leaves or something like that, would that be a cocoon as well, or?
Potato, potato. I think you could go either way on that.
Who says potato though?
Yeah, you know,
Sorry.
tomato, tomato,
Right, exactly.
centimeter, inch.
All right. So I do remember telling them that butterflies don't make cocoons.
Correct.
So I was kind of half right, I guess.
Yeah, so I was ready to say that, and I think, well, some skippers, they have a little silken shelter in a leaf. Does that count as a cocoon? I don't know. I'm not
That
a
one might have
butterfly
been
guy.
And I know there's so rarely you can say this always happens this way or this always happens. People want hard, fast rules, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, nature's
happen.
messy.
Right, exactly.
And I should talk a little bit about diversity. So worldwide, there's about 160,000 species of moths that are described. As far as undescribed species, so new to science, is probably a lot more, and we really can't venture a good guess as to how many more.
Right.
In New York State, I'm currently working with colleague Hugh McGinnis, documenting the Lepidoptera diversity of New York State, and we've documented just over 3,000 species, and we expect 4,000 species plus. As far as native versus non-native, one of the risks of doing mothing is you get an insect in your throat.
But is this a, do you know those drain flies? Doesn't this look kind of like one?
There's a reason for that, because that's exactly what it is.
Oh, it is a drain fly. Okay.
But this would be one that doesn't live in drains.
Yeah, it looks different. It's a bit smaller, it seems.
So what's interesting with the drain flies, they're common little flies. They're also called moth flies, because they kind of look like a little moth.
Oh, I think they totally look like a moth completely.
But one of the more common ones you get indoors in drains where they feed on bacterial sludge is called clogmia, which is one of my favorite.
Clogmia. Wow. And they kind of look cool because when they're resting, how do you describe? Because I swear it's different from like what a housefly does. You
Yes, absolutely. So a housefly is resting its wings over its back in the same format or the same direction, but they're closer together. With the moth flies, they're broader wings first of all, and they're splayed out more.
More like a moth.
Yeah.
So there we go. We talked about a fly, but it's very moth-like.
Yeah, and as far as native versus non-native species in New York goes, we actually have a pretty high number of non-native species, being close to the port of New York and New Jersey and the St. Lawrence Seaway. So it's about 5% of our fauna that's not native.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, but it's increasing every day.
Yeah. Of course.
Should we go and have a look at the sheet? Because I do
Oh,
see
yeah.
there's moths there.
Oh yeah, I gotta throw those special glasses on.
So describe for the audience the glasses that you gave us. What is this about?
So what I've given everyone are just UV goggles because the lights that we've got here put out a lot of UV light, and our eyes don't pick up UV light very well, so your eyes think it's really dark, and so your pupils dilate and let all that UV light in to fry the back of your eye. You don't want to do that.
Yikes.
So this will save your eyes a bit.
Thank you.
Yes.
And so the difference, if we were using the mercury vapor light that I use at home most often, there you've got a lot of visible light, so your eyes think it's bright, so it's not quite as dangerous. And here's the spongy moth. There's some males right there. And so to describe those, they have a triangular profile. They're probably just under an inch in length. The males have great big fuzzy antennae, what we call bipectinate. And whenever you see a moth with fuzzy antenna, what you can tell is that they use their sense of smell. So the females will produce a pheromone, and the males will fly around until they find them.
Oh, and we have mating crane flies.
Yep.
Not the goal, but
And one watching.
one perv.
No, they took off. They didn't like them. We also have some interesting moths. There's a bunch of these. You usually don't see too many of these. These are slug moths, and they're called slug moths because the caterpillars have these really stumpy legs, and they move just like a slug. And this one's called Tortricidia flexuosa. It probably has a common name, but it's one of the slug moths, is what I can say. I usually just see one or two at a light, but I can see there's at least 5 or 6, maybe 7.
I never knew that they were called slug moths, and it's definitely one that I've seen before. I never knew what to call it, though.
Yeah, and some of them actually have venomous spines. This particular species doesn't. It's really hard. It's like got the texture of a plastic bead.
Whoa.
And then the soft bits are underneath.
That's cool.
So
And-
I do have to say, folks, that we have like dozens of insects all over this sheet, and they're all flying around.
And on you and me.
Yeah, right? There's
Linda's getting them in her face.
Yeah, they're
up her
landing
nose.
on us. So.
Mine's going up my shirt.
When you go to bed, you'll have some company come out.
So who do we have over here? Is that another spongy
So
moth?
that's a non-native one as well. So the spongy moth's not native. That one is called the large yellow underwing. Now,
okay.
it's actually not a true underwing. It's completely unrelated. It's a different family. It's a European type of cutworm. The caterpillars are generalists on various low plants, and they're actually easy to find midwinter. If you get a good warm day midwinter, especially with some freezing rain, the caterpillars, for whatever reason, come out and walk out on top of the snow. And they're about as thick as my pinky, so they're pretty big caterpillars.
Oh, wow.
But if we look at it, so right now, it's just, over an inch long?
Yeah.
And sort of drab brownish, a few little dark markings on it. And if I give it a little tap, you're going to see orange and black hindwings.
Oh,
You saw a little flash when
Yep,
it jumped
yep,
off
yep.
the sheet.
I think it's on me now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It likes the mic.
Yeah.
We also have some forest tent caterpillar and I think eastern tent caterpillar here too. So 2 different types of tent caterpillar. So eastern tent caterpillar produces a tent, which is where it gets the name from, of silk. So the larvae live in there. It protects them from a lot of predators. It also helps them thermoregulate, so they can actually position themselves on the tent to catch the morning sun to warm up.
Now, am I confusing them with like a webworm, or are they the ones that have like a dance rave when you make noise around them? Because one of them, like in their tents, they'll like move around a ton.
Oh, okay. A lot of them will do that.
Yeah.
Because typically if they've got a tent, they've also got defensive hairs.
Mm.
So with tent caterpillar, I don't know if they do that. I think fall webworm will do that.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
But it's sort of an intimidation thing, so that you've got these moving, urticating hairs, so you want to think twice about attacking them.
And the tent caterpillars typically make their tents in the spring, right?
Yes, so it's spraying usually on cherry,
Yeah.
and it's right in the crotches of branches. So like picture an upside down tent. Fall webworm takes a whole branch and covers the whole thing. So you get a big lob on the end. Most often these seen on things like ash. And they stick out very well. If you do Christmas bird counts, I've tried to turn so many of those into shrikes over the years. As you see off in the distance, the very top of some
Yep.
ash tree will have remnants of a nest, and it sits like a nice little shrike there. But of course, it's that species. Now the other tent caterpillar here, the forest tent caterpillar, doesn't produce a tent at all. They sort of live singly, and then they molt together on a big, what's called a molting pad. And molting is shedding their skin. So they set up this big silken pad on a tree trunk. They all get together, they molt, and then they all go their separate ways. But yeah, they don't produce anything beyond that.
Are they called a tent caterpillar because they're so closely related to the eastern tent, or is
Yeah.
it just a okay?
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're the same genus, so they're very closely related. They're actually quite similar in appearance too, both the adult and the larvae. But actually, what's really neat, the larvae of the forest tent caterpillar, if you look up pictures of it online, on the back it looks like little keyhole shapes, whereas the eastern tent caterpillar, it's a straight line. The other thing that was pointed out to me a few years ago is that the keyhole shapes, if you turn the caterpillar upside down, look like little penguins. It's really quite distinct. So I really recommend looking up because it does look like little tiny penguins all lined up there. I'll just check out the back of the sheet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's lots back here.
Oh, we haven't seen this one yet.
No.
But this is a
there's
really
few.
popular one. I feel like I see it like every time. But
So
I also think it's really
do like talking about that
showy.
one
Yeah.
because it's a choice edible.
Oh,
What?
really?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that's a choice edible. So what we're looking at here, the name sounds disgusting, Macaria pustularia,
Oh,
the lesser maple spanworm. And I would never advise people to eat insects because you never know what you're allergic to, but that is one of my favorite to eat. It's got a
wow.
mild peanut buttery taste.
wow. So it's called a worm and has pus in the name, but it
Yes.
tastes like peanut butter a little bit.
And say the name of that one again.
Macaria pustularia, the lesser maple spanworm.
Can we
Wow.
get Steve to eat one right now?
I'm not going to eat one.
No?
And so that is one of the inchworms, as is that one and that one. So we've got a variety of inchworms here.
So the one we were just talking about, when it's landed, it's flattened out its body. It's almost pure white, but it's got these little
Brown
little
specks.
brown specks along the
The leading edge of the wing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a
The
really
forewing.
showy one. It's it kind of stands out how white it is. Like white on the white sheet, you wouldn't think it stands out, but it does.
It's only about an inch long.
Mhm.
Yeah, from wingtip to wingtip, right?
Yeah, and when I'm identifying moths, what moth people tell you is you sort of go by gestalt. They just have a look to them. So like inchworm moths usually look like this. They've got big broad wings and a slender body. Those are inchworms. Obviously very different than slug moth, which have stout wings. And then leaf roller moths, the tortoises, the ones I'm interested in, generally have this sort of bell look shape to them and are quite small. The wings are held fairly roof-like, so they do sort of stick out in that way. And then resting posture can be useful too. So here's one that looks like it's doing push-ups. And this one's called the drab condylolomia, which is not really much of an English name. Condylolomia participalis. It likes feeding on plants that are related to Myricas, the Myrica family, so sweet fern. There's a bunch of sweet fern nearby here. That's probably what it's feeding on. Also feeds on Myrica. Oh, and then we've got a little twirler moth.
Oh, that one's got a cool design on it.
Twirler
Look at
moths,
that.
that's the family Gelacheidae, and it's actually a really difficult group as far as identifying things as species, except that one. That's a pretty easy one. I'm almost certain this one's called Dichomeris flavocostella, which probably has a common name. But we'll call it one of the twirler moths for now. And they're called twirler moths because of a behavior that a lot of them do, not this one, but a bunch of the other ones. When they land on a leaf during the day, they spin around on the spot. They sort of twirl around. And someone asked me recently why they do that. And I've never read anything that suggests why they do that. But my best guess, after thinking about it for a while, is that a lot of species have a fake head on their butt.
Right.
And so when they're trying to confuse a predator, they land, they spin around, so you can't tell which end is the head end. That's my complete guess there. I haven't seen anything published on that. So it's probably completely wrong.
We didn't describe what this twirler moth looks like.
I've been even thinking about how I would describe it.
So it's small.
Yeah.
What would you say? Maybe half an inch?
Yeah, something like that. It's
a
about a
little
centimeter.
bit less.
Quarter
Yeah.
inch? Yeah. Oh, a centimeter.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to use the metric system.
Yeah, so I'm trying to
bounce
grasp
back and
inches.
forth.
I haven't been in the U.S.
I know.
long enough.
But the pattern is the pattern's hard to describe.
Yes. I mean, describe the wings because they're not, what I would typically think of when I see a moth at rest.
The forewings are pretty narrowly triangular. They overlap each other, so it's flat over the back. So it's sort of shaped like an arrowhead almost.
Yeah, that's a good way to
that's a
describe
good
it. There
way
you
to
go.
say it, yeah.
And then the pattern is really striking. So it's jet black, except the leading edge of each forewing is sort of cream with a big tooth on the outer third.
It's kind
and then-
of juts in a little bit.
And then as far as identifying it to family, the character we look at for a lot of micromoths is the head structures. And so if you have a good close lateral view of it, you're going to see it has great big orange horns on it.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like slicked back over its head.
Yeah, so they're upcurved labial palps is a technical term. And so palps are mouth parts, and most of these moths have some sort of palps that are obvious. Some more than others, but on that one they're big and obvious. And that's a good character for Gelacheidae and a few other related families, the twirler moths and some of the related families. There's other characters you need a microscope for, but that's the most useful one. The other character, and I can't believe I didn't talk about this before, but a lot of these moths have a proboscis. So called proboscis, which they use for drinking fluids. This one has what we call scaly proboscis. There's actually scales on the proboscis, whereas most moths do not have that.
Interesting.
So maybe we should take a walk and check out the other light.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
And I bet we'll probably have some similar species, but we'll probably see a bunch of different ones there.
Cool. Okay, we've made it to the second net, and there are some different things here.
Yeah, so we can see some similarities. There's lots of spongy moth here, just like the previous site. This one here is called a cloaked marvel. Oh, there it disappeared. Well, anyways, that was a cloaked marvel.
Mm-hmm.
It's called that because there's one not very common form of it that has a beautiful white blotch in the center of the wing. And I point out because it's unusual in that the caterpillars actually feed on fungi. Most of these caterpillars are plant feeders. That one you'll find on various fleshy fungi, usually a little later in the summer. But they'll eat anything with fungi on it. We also have a gray panthea. So this one is pretty big, so it's about the size of my thumb knuckle, and grayish with some darker wavy gray lines. And it's a conifer feeder. I usually find the caterpillars on eastern white pine, which there's some right around us. And the caterpillar, basically, if you asked a 4-year-old to design a caterpillar out of pipe cleaners, it's what this caterpillar looks like. It's got sloppy, messy hairs scattered about, and it just looks like a poor attempt to make a caterpillar. Oh, here's actually another neat one. This is another fungus feeding one. So this is really beautiful, but you got to get close up to it.
Not being attacked by moths. Yeah, I mean, it is a cool one.
I just inhaled one there. So this one's called Epicalema. And this is a species where the caterpillars live under the bark of dead trees and feed on fungi. And so if you burn firewood, you often get a large number of those indoors in the middle of winter. Oh, and a scorpion fly. So scorpion flies are a weird order. They're the order Mecoptera. And if you look at it in lateral view, you'll see the males have a great big genitalia that they curl up over the back that look like a scorpion's tail. And then they also have this crazy long snout that looks like basically you stuck a giant straw in its face. Mm-hmm. The wings are sort of long and skinny and held up kind of to the side. And I'm enjoying inhaling moss.
Remember, don't do moths, kids.
I'm a moth head. And then there's the standard woolly bear. So right here,
Isabella moth?
yeah, Isabella tiger moth is the common name of the adult. So the caterpillar is called the woolly bear. Orange in the middle, black on both ends.
They're really good for predicting how long winter is going to be or something.
It's good at predicting the previous winter.
Oh, the previous winter.
Which
That's
isn't
what
a
it is.
You can find different bandwidths on the caterpillars on the same day, so it's not a predictor of the upcoming winter, but it is a common tale, and I've done too many media interviews about that. And
Sorry for bringing back those
People want
memories.
it to be true.
they really do, and they get quite
Yeah.
hostile when you tell them otherwise.
Just, how funny of an answer would it have been to be like, oh, I've never heard of that before. Like, what?
So there's a moth down here, I'll point out. That one is called the unicorn prominent. It looks kind of like a broken stubby twig as an
Yeah.
adult, but if you get a close look, it's got some little washes of pinkish and greenish and blackish on it. It's called a unicorn prominent because the caterpillars have this gigantic horn that sticks out on their thorax, and it looks kind of like a unicorn horn. And the reason why it's got this horn is that that whole segment of the body has this gigantic gland that secretes formic acid. So if you pop one of the caterpillars in your mouth, it's going to burn.
Whoa.
So they're quite well defended.
And there's a lot of moths called prominents, right?
Yeah, it's not a huge family. There's lots in the tropics. But here it's probably about 40 or 50 species in New York State.
Okay.
Oh, and there's the large lace border sitting nicely.
Oh, yep.
Oh, not anymore.
Doesn't like to be pointed out. We're going to talk about him eventually.
Yeah, so, okay. Now it's sitting still. Don't point at it. It doesn't like that. It's rude. The large lace border. So it's another one of the intro moths. So a slender body, big broad wings. The wings are held very flat out at rest and wide open. And it's called large lace border because it's sort of white, but it's got this sort of dark grayish lace border to both wings. And now, while it kind of looks pretty distinct on the sheet here, when they're out during the daytime, they rest on tops of leaves, and they look just like washed out bird poop.
Oh.
And bird poop is a very common strategy that moths use to camouflage themselves, both adults and larvae.
I'm going to walk these guys back to the car.
No?
No?
And at this point, it was after 10 p.m., well past bedtime for my daughter. But as she and my wife said their thank yous and goodbyes to Jason, the subject of hummingbird moths came up.
What's the deal?
Do you? What do they? I mean,
No.
We get them in the garden.
I think we need you to say it like Jerry said.
No, I will not. I will not.
So hummingbird moths are a type of sphinx moth,
Oh, okay.
also called hawk moths. And our species around here are diurnal, so they come out during the day. We have 4 species in New York, and some of them look just like a hummingbird in flight, and some look like bumblebees in flight. All of our species are in the genus Hemeris. The caterpillars are a type of hornworm, so the big thick caterpillar with a horn at the end. We have 2 common ones here in the Finger Lakes. We've got hummingbird clearwing and snowberry clearwing. Hummingbird clearwing, I think, is on a bunch of viburnums and relatives, if I remember correctly. Maybe honeysuckles too. And then snowberry clearwing is on snowberries.
We get them in our butterfly garden.
Right.
Yeah,
Remember where they were on?
Well, he's talking about the larva.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and the adults visit all kinds of different flowers.
Oh,
Any
okay.
sort of tubular flower that's sort of open.
Hornworms attack like tomato plants and stuff too, right? Or is that a different?
There are 2 types that feed on tomatoes.
Okay.
Tomato hornworm and tobacco hornworm. So they're same family as hummingbird clearwings, but different subfamilies.
Got it. Okay. So hummingbird clearwing, and then the other one was
Snowberry clearwing.
Snowberry clearwing. Okay.
Yeah, and the other 2 species in New York State are quite rare. One slender clearwing, mostly in the Adirondacks and nearby. It's, I think, a blueberry feeder. I get it in blueberry barrens. And it looks pretty similar to snowberry clearwing. And then there's one that's nearly identical to snowberry clearwing. It doesn't have a common name yet, I don't think, because it was just described recently, called Hemeris ethra. And it feeds on bush honeysuckle, so Dirvilla lanicera. And it's more common as you go north. So in Maine, it's quite common, the larvae, and in Ontario, I've seen it quite commonly. I've not seen it down here, but there are records for the Adirondacks for that one as well.
Okay. I'm going to take them.
And with our questions about hummingbird moths answered, my wife and daughter departed, leaving Steve, Jason, and myself to continue exploring what was coming into the lights.
So you saw a carrion beetle there.
Oh, is that what that was?
That was the carrion beetle Necrophorus. I'm going to see if it's on the other side. So carrion beetles obviously feed on carrion. The genus Necrophorus, they're a group called the burying beetles. And so what they do, yummy moth, they will find a carcass, a mated pair, and they will, if it's a small carcass, they'll bury it underground to avoid competition from flies, because flies usually get their, oh, here it's back.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. Oh, and actually...
What does he got? Has he got something?
No.
Oh, he's
But it's covered in mites.
That's right.
I've heard of
Look here,
this.
look at here. So if you look laterally on this, you'll see a whole bunch of mites. Those mites hitchhike on it. See them all?
Oh, yeah.
And so what it does, the pair will bury the carcass, and then these mites drop off and they feast on fly eggs, and they get rid of the competition. And so you can see, it's even underneath it, there's tons of mites on it. And they're one of the few insects that actually take care of their young. So what they'll do is the pair will start to chew up the decaying carcass and basically create a mush for the babies to feed on.
And make baby food.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I think we saw one of our only green ones. It was almost like a nice pale
Oh, on the other
green
side.
on the other
A
side.
small green one. Isn't it?
These guys?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Well, now
Oh,
there's
there's 3 of
2.
them.
Oh, 3.
Yeah, so that is an emerald. And emeralds, this particular genus, Nemoria, the caterpillars, I think these ones feed on blueberries and really plants. I could be wrong on that. Emeralds are called that because they are brilliant green. And this might be the red-fronted emerald, which has a pink border to the wings.
Picking up a lot of wing beats on the mic at this point.
And over here, this is not a common moth. This is a lichen moth. This is the scarlet lichen moth.
Oh, wow.
Or actually, no,
Oh.
sorry, that's a painted lichen moth.
That's cool.
So how would you describe that guy?
Oh gosh, orange near the head. The wings were orange, but they had these big black spots on that almost take up the entire wing.
It flew away.
Yeah, and so it's something that's obviously quite toxic, and they probably sequester those toxins from lichens. There's not a lot of things that eat lichens because they produce all these really nasty chemicals,
Really?
and those ones feed on various, I think that one's on foliose lichens on tree trunks, so the kinds that look kind of leafy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ones that feed more on fruticose lichens, so things like reindeer moss and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another handsome, prominent moth. This one's the genus Ditana. Ditana, I don't know which particular one this is. They're kind of difficult to identify. The larvae are really quite distinct, typically stripy and kind of hairy, and they're usually in big groups. And when you disturb them, they raise both their head and butt in a really characteristic manner, looking like a very square-shaped U. And they do it rhythmically, so it's really quite dramatic to see. I had someone submit photos of that behavior, and they were convinced that it was a new cell tower causing this mutation in caterpillars.
Yeah.
And I told them, well, that's what they do.
You told them they were right.
Yeah. And here's one called a jackpine budworm. And with a lot of conifer feeders, you'll find the caterpillars are usually green and stripy, but a lot of the adults sort of look like this mottled orange pattern. And what this kind of looks like in nature is the male cones of conifers. So it's really complex pattern. And this pattern is convergent in a whole lot of conifer feeding moths that are about that size. Here's another one here. So it's called a jackpine budworm. Historically, this is something that was most common on jackpine, and there's no jackpine anywhere near here. But in more recent years, it's been feeding on eastern white pine more commonly, and has become more common down in this part of New York. Although it was found in other parts further south, probably feeding on other hard pines. But yeah, it seems to have broadened its diet. And a few other cool things that are here. So we've got princess wasps, also called ichneumon wasps. So here's one right here.
Did you say Ichneumon?
Ichneumon. Yeah.
Ichneumon, yeah.
Here's another one.
I've heard of that for sure.
These are parasitoids, so different than a parasite in that they kill their host in the end. Both of the, here's some more impressive. Look at the crazy ovipositor on that
Oh,
one.
wow, it's longer than the body.
So picture, we got various types of wasps here, long gangly legs, wings held over the back, and some of them have a crazy butt dagger. An ovipositor.
Mm-hmm.
Butt dagger.
And typically for ones with really long ovipositors, like this one, it's longer than the rest of its body. With ones like that, they're either boring inside wood, or if you find some caterpillars that roll a leaf into a nice tight cone, they can actually go in after their prey like that with that long butt dagger. Other ones, it's much more subtle, but that is still a princess wasp or ichneumon. Ichneumon wasp is the proper name in North America. The Japanese common name for it is princess wasp, which I think is much more descriptive and interesting. So I try to popularize princess wasp. And I actually have a princess wasp named after me.
What?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there is an Ophion Dombroskie.
Whoa.
Who named it?
Colleague of mine, a former office mate of mine.
Ah.
She worked on these wasps that are nocturnal, come to moth light, so of course I'd get tons. And I'd always bring her some from my field trips. And I'd always throw in something else to be annoying to make her actually work for it.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd throw in wasps like braconids or flies or whatever, just to be annoying.
Uh-huh.
And this one very unproductive trip I did to Saskatchewan, where I had, I think, 4 moths the whole trip. It was absolutely brutal.
Geez.
But I collected a bunch of princess wasps, and the genus she's working on was Ophion. And Ophion is always orange or yellowish. That's what they are. So I threw in some of those. And then there was a black one. So I was like, throw that in. Black princess wasp. Turns out it was the first black Ophion for North America. And
Whoa.
so she named it after me for being annoying, basically.
Cool.
But it's only known from a single specimen, so I've yet to see another one. Found in a cow pasture in Saskatchewan. So, because I like talking about moth genitalia, I got to talk about this very unimpressive looking moth. This is one called the oblique-banded leaf roller, which normally has oblique bands to it, but this one has absolutely no pattern to it at all. Now, moth genitalia, if you talk to anybody that identifies moths for a living, we'll talk your ear off about genitalia, because they're really complicated structures in both the males and the females. And the males often have really neat structures to basically...
Oh, there he goes.
One less moth in the rope. Wow. And in this particular species, the reproductive tract of the female looks like a human intestine. It's this long, windy thing. And for the male to be able to deposit sperm where it needs to go, he needs a ridiculous phallus. And so the phallus itself is actually pretty short in this, but it everts this structure. So basically, if you pictured, like, if I had a rubber glove in my hand and then inflated it, picture that, but like a long silly snake, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And in this species, its phallus everts to 3 times as long as his body.
Wow.
And it's absolutely crazy to match that the female's
He's a
reproductive
grower.
system. Yeah. But yeah, very unimpressive looking moth, but impressive genitalia.
So we were kind of talking, and we realized that we hadn't talked about why moths are even attracted to light in the first place.
Yeah, so basically, not all moths come to light. There's a lot that are flying by, or a lot that are fly only during the day. But we do have a good selection here. It's not just moths. We're getting flies and beetles and wasps. Mm-hmm. But the short answer is we really don't know. And the theory I used to like was that they use light to navigate, so the moon, and then they get confused by it. But I've since come across a theory I like a lot better that's come out of some German research that suggests that they actually get blinded by the light.
Oh.
And as an analogy, you and I have pretty decent night vision. We've got different cells in the back of our eyes. We've got rod cells and cone cells. And the cone cells are good in high light, and they pick up color. But at night, those shut down, and our rod cells take over, and they only see in black and white, and they're good in low light conditions. But if you've got your night vision going, you've been out in the dark, and you're navigating successfully, and I shine a flashlight in your eye, I've killed your night vision. You've lost it for about 20 minutes, and you're essentially blinded. And so as a moth flying around, if you get close enough to this light, I like to think of it as like an event horizon. You get close enough where you've lost your night vision. Are you going to fly off in the dark? Or are you going to go rest somewhere until you sort things out? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a more viable theory in my personal opinion, and it seems to make sense. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like if you use a really, really bright light, like there's some ridiculously powerful lights that people use, the micros don't even get anywhere near the light. They stop way out there on neighboring trees and things like that. So some people will actually cycle between using a bright light and a dim light.
Yeah.
And even like right here, you'll see on the neighboring trees, there are some moths sitting that are coming that close.
I've been noticing them in the grass below and on the trees and branches around there, and on the strings and on my mic and everything.
On your face. And
yeah.
That's often where the good stuff
in my
is,
pockets,
somewhere
up my shorts. Yeah.
So I think this is a good place to wrap up. And Jason, we just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for giving us this day, mm-hmm. which I don't know about you, Steve, but I'm going to remember this always.
Oh, yeah.
Everything we got to see today, everything that you've shared with us, you've just been so generous with your time.
Well, everything that we saw yesterday and now this morning.
That's true. Because it's
about 20 to 1.
But for the listeners out there, where can they go to find out more about your work?
So there's a bunch of different ways. So I'm not too active on social media anymore. The whole racism thing bothers me a bit.
Oh.
But I do have a Facebook page. There is a Cornell University Insect Collection Facebook page. We actually have students hired to man other social media items. So we've got a TikTok that's very popular, Instagram, and Twitter. So you can find the Cornell University Insect Collection on those platforms, and we regularly post stuff on there. Less so on Facebook. That's because I'm in charge of that one. But I also have a lab website. If you Google Jason Dombroskie or jasondombroskie.com, you'll find it. And I advertise various public events that I do. I also want to encourage people, if you're in the Finger Lakes region, check out the Museum of the Earth. We've got an exhibit there going on through December of 2022. And it's really the cream of the crop of the collection on display there. So it's really well worth seeing. And there's also a website for it. And then finally, if you're also in the Ithaca area in sort of late October-ish, we haven't picked a solid date yet, we have Insectapalooza, which is a very popular event put on by the Department of Entomology at Cornell. And basically that's where every lab in the entomology department and some other related departments that cover something to do with insects displays their research. And so you get to see all kinds of really cool research in action and cool study organisms. We also bring out about 50 drawers from the actual collection and talk about them and show things on the big screen that are really tiny and whatnot. So it's well worth seeing. It's very popular. We usually get several thousand people at it.
That sounds so cool.
I know I'm coming.
And that will be advertised on the department website and probably on all our social medias as well.
Great.
Well, it's going to take us a little while to edit this all together because there's just so much great stuff to share. This will definitely
edit out the people coughing on moths. Choking on moths.
We've never had to do that before.
Yeah.
But thank you again, and we hope to have you on again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. It'd be great fun.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you guys.
Ciao.
And with that, our adventure came to an end. I know I can speak for Steve when I say we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. Of course, we need to say thank you again to Jason for sharing so much of his time and expertise. Visit our website, thefieldguidespodcast.com, for the links to all the websites and the social media feeds Jason mentioned, including their Insectapalooza celebration. The 2022 event has already passed, but you can mark your calendars for October 2023. You can also visit the episode page for the pictures and videos that go with this episode, as well as our social media feeds to see more images from our tour and our mothing trip. We also want to give a big thank you to our patrons for making this episode a reality. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we want to shout out some gratitude to our new patrons: Measure and Principal, JJ Cothi, Nikki Diaz, Frugaria Papillionoidea, Stephen Martin, Outside Chronicles, and Nona CL3. As always, stick around to the very end of the episode, where, as a special thank you, Violet will read out the names of our top patrons. Thank you as well to Gumleaf USA for their continuing support of our show. Gumleaf USA offers Wellington-style natural rubber boots for men and women, and patrons of the show receive a special offer code for free shipping on any Gumleaf USA order. Check out a link to Gumleaf USA in our episode notes. Finally, we want to thank Walden Heights Nursery and Orchard for their recent support of the podcast. Based in Walden Heights, Vermont, they are a certified organic farm specializing in cold hardy growing that supplies fruit to consumers, plants for those who want to grow their own fruit, help and advice on organic growing methods, and a place to see how it is done. Check out a link to them on the episode notes. Please don't forget to visit us on social media, leave a review for our show wherever you get your podcasts, and send us any episode ideas to thefieldguides@gmail.com. And with that, Steve and I wish you a happy ending to 2022 and remind all you parents out there, please get your kids outside. Let them get muddy and dirty and or snowy, and let them flip over rocks and logs. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time. And as promised, here is Violet with this episode's top patrons.
Alyssa, Eric, the Hebranks, Adam, Mary, Diane, Jessica, Callie, Ken, Orange Julianne, Sean, we named the dog Indy, Dwayne, Jonathan A., Andrew, Ben C., Bethany, Brandon, Bruce, Doodle Dude 82, Esther, Helen, Jake, Jane, Jeff, John, Judy, Kelly, Quixote, MD, Mark V, Max D, Melissa in Dusty, Arizona, Nathan, Outside Chronicles, Rob M, Robert P, Sarah, Hannah.
On behalf of Steve, we want to say thank you so much to all of our patrons and especially the people on our list. You make our podcast possible. Thank you so much.
Starting to fly up my shorts.
Yep.
You imbecile.